welcome to the start of our second season with this exciting episode of Ranking the World's Worst People. In this channel, we walk you through the life and evil acts of the worst people in the world, and then we rank them at the end of each episode. Our goal is to put all the worst people who have ever lived in one single league with videos that let you know exactly what they have done. New for this season is that we will be releasing a new episode every week for the next 10 weeks. So, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to make sure you catch each episode. You will also be able to subscribe and then get access to all the episodes of the season instantly. Now in today's episode, we'll be taking a look at Irma Grese. Swiss psychologist Carl Jung once said, "A healthy man does not torture others. Generally, it is the tortured who turn into torturers." Sometimes when we examine the lives of sadists, we may begin to imagine that they may have turned out differently if they had a better past. However, that doesn't take anything away from their list of inhumane crimes. Our case study for today is someone who at first glance, no one will imagine that she can be capable of such monstrous deeds. But you know what they say, right? Never judge a book by its cover. From the psychopathic Dr. Josef Mengele to the cruel propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels, many of whom do not look like they could hurt a fly. The names of Adolf Hitler's Nazi henchmen and henchwomen have become synonymous with evil. Irma Grese committed innumerable acts of sadism and roamed the women's camps at Ravensbrück, Auschwitz, and Bergen-Belsen looking for female victims to abuse. Follow us as we explore how Irma Grese went from being a troubled teen to becoming one of the most sadistic guards to ever work inside a Nazi concentration camp. But just before we get into that, leave a comment to let us know what score you will give to the troubled kid turned notorious Nazi guard, Irma Grese. Also, click on that like button because now you're definitely going to like this video. Who was Irma Grese? Irma Grese was born Irma Ilse Ida Grese on October 7, 1923, in the small village of Rechen in the beautiful rural Mecklenburg region of northern Germany. Ravensbrück, the infamous concentration camp for women, lay not far from Rechen. Hold on to this information, because you might need it to pass your judgment. Irma's father, Alfred Anton Albert Grese, was a farmer, and her mother was Bertha Wilhelmina Winter Grese. Bertha, Irma's mother, committed suicide in 1932 when Irma was 9 years old, upon discovering that her husband was cheating on her with a local pub owner's daughter. Irma was one of 5 children. Helena was her youngest sister. However, the birth order of the other 3 children is unknown and has been lost to history. Alfred Grese was described as a conservative farmer, a regular church-going Christian, and very stern and strict with his children. Beatings were not uncommon. Alfred had an aversion towards the Nazis, so he forbade his daughters from joining the Bund Deutscher Mädel, League of German Girls, or any other Nazi organization. Going against their father's wishes, both Irma and Helena joined the BDM voluntarily. The activities in the BDM also allowed Irma to escape from her rigid and oppressive life at home. Irma's early life and Nazi indoctrination. In 1933, when Adolf Hitler and the Nazis came to power in Germany, 10-year-old Irma became attracted by the Nazi. At this point, Irma's father couldn't do anything about his daughter's indoctrination into the Nazi, because the Enabling Act of March 23, 1933, mandated a Nazi education in all elementary schools. Irma, on the other hand, was a willing convert to Nazism, as she felt that the Weimar Republic was overly open-minded, decadent, and too permissive, and had corrupted the German people. As a result, gravitating towards the right-wing, conservative ideology of Nazism came naturally for her. Having struggled with schoolwork, Irma dropped out at age 14 and worked as a farmhand for about 6 months. She then worked as a retail sales clerk in a shop in Luchen. Nobody knows why Irma left school, but it could have been for a number of reasons. Helena testified that Grese was bullied badly and lacked the courage to stand up for herself, and since she could not tolerate the torment of school, she dropped out. Irma didn't have it easy as a child. Throughout her childhood, there were more problems for her. Going by the testimony given by her sister Helena at the Bergen-Belsen tribunal as Irma's character witness, Irma was known to run away from fights and never participated in them during her elementary school years. She stated that Irma wasn't capable of beating female inmates in the camps because of her aversion to violence. Irma's dream was to become a nurse, and in 1939 she joined the SS convalescent hospital, Hohenleichen. learning from an orthopedic surgeon, Karl Gebhardt, who performed unspeakable medical experiments on prisoners. Karl participated in bone grafting medical experimentation on living human being subjects at Ravensbrück and Hohenleichen. He also devoted himself to using sulfa drugs for gangrenous wounds and transplanting bones in an attempt to regenerate severed nerves. It could be argued that being exposed to these agonizingly painful experiments may have been Irma's first exposure to sadism. Not only did Irma try to learn nursing at Hohenleichen, she also became well indoctrinated in SS and race ideology there. A change in career path. Irma was generally not suited to learning anything, as she also failed at becoming a nurse. Gebhardt then advised her that she should probably use her talents elsewhere, and suggested she contact one of his friends at Ravensbrück. At that time, she was then just 17 years old, and this suggestion from Gebhardt would deeply impact many lives in the coming months and years. Grese arrived at Ravensbrück in April 1941, but she was told to return in 6 months after she had reached age 18. In the meantime, the Reichsarbeitsdienst, Reich Labor Service, or RAD, assigned her to work at a dairy farm in Fürstenberg as a machinist from April 1941 to July 1942. Irma Grese returned to Ravensbrück around this time, and although she claimed that she still wanted to become a nurse, she joined the SS as a conscript of the SS Aufseherinnen, female guards at the concentration camps, juvenile detention facilities, and police supervisory services. She was thereafter assigned to be trained as a concentration camp guard. Irma Grese endured 3 weeks of grueling training at Ravensbrück to toughen her and engineer a fanatical devotion to the Nazi racial ideal. In her first days, she is remembered as apologizing to a camp inmate when she stepped in front of her. Apparently, according to reports, it took 4 days to rid Grese of her politeness and humanity. Normally, it would take a full month to completely brainwash a new recruit, but in Grese's case, it took only 3 weeks. Grese participated in inmate beatings at Ravensbrück, and this was merely a part of her training. Grese's father cuts ties with her. At age 19, Irma Grese received orders transferring her to Auschwitz-Birkenau near Krakow, Poland, in March 1943. Before leaving for camp, Irma visited her father while wearing her full SS dress uniform. During the visit, her father questioned her about her duties at Ravensbrück. The pair quarreled intensely about her career in the SS, and he told her never to return home. It is even reported that he beat her, too. This event took a toll on Irma Grese to the extent that when the British prosecutor, T.M. Backhouse, questioned her about this event at her trial, she wept openly in court. Despite his abuse of her, Irma had apparently been deeply affected by this separation from her father, and his subsequent disapproval of who she was and would become. She hated her father, and that hate festered and grew. Irma Grese becomes the beautiful beast. Upon her arrival at Auschwitz-Birkenau, Grese was assigned to the women's camp at B2/B in Birkenau, where the killing and burning of Jews and other victims of the Third Reich occurred in greater numbers. Apart from being a prison guard, Irma Grese had other duties there, including commanding a gardening squad, being a telephone operator, and even censoring the mail. In May 1944, Grese was promoted to Oberaufseherin, the second highest rank an SS Aufseherin could achieve, and had over 30,000 women prisoners under her command. With great power comes great responsibility, but in Irma's case, more cruelty. Survivors recalled that she wore heavy boots and carried a whip and pistol. Every survivor account refers to these 3 sadistic objects Grese became infamous for owning and using. Another thing that made Irma Grese stand out amongst other female guards was her beauty. Survivors dubbed her the beautiful beast, the blonde angel, and the blonde angel of hell. She had natural blonde hair and blue eyes and wore expertly tailored uniforms. She was also fond of many rare and expensive perfumes, which she wore to torment the prisoners under her command. Grese the Sadist. While in Auschwitz-Birkenau, Grese was reported to use her whip and pistol to punish inmates for the slightest infractions of camp rules, and made a hobby out of lashing busty women across the breasts with her whip. In fact, the women had learned to dread the penalty of her attentions, the least of which meant a whiplash on the nipple. Gisela Perl, a surgeon at the camp then, recalled Grese's sadism and cruelty, relating that many of the women developed infections in their breasts from injuries caused by the braided wire end of her cellophane whip. Perl was called upon by Grese to operate on these women with an unsterilized knife without even providing anesthesia available for these operations. As a result, the women screamed in agony, and Perl recalls Irma enjoying the show. Asides that, Grese also employed 1 or 2 huge dogs as part of her brutal reign in the Birkenau women's camp. Survivors recall her riding around camp on a bicycle with a dog at her side accompanying the female inmates on their 16-kilometer trek to work. If they couldn't keep up with the line, she ordered her dog to attack them without mercy. Among Irma's other notorious exploits at Auschwitz-Birkenau was tying the legs together of a woman about to give birth and watching her agony. Grese becomes the Beast of Belsen. Grese's tenure at the camp finally came to an end in January 1945, as the Red Army advanced into Poland and approached Auschwitz. There she was transferred to Bergen-Belsen in March 1945, where the food, housing, and sanitary conditions were an eyesore. One would think that the change of camps would have a positive effect on Grese and make her less cruel. But it wasn't the case. Her brutality toward inmates became even worse in Belsen. There, she made prisoners kneel for long periods of time. Prisoners also had to hold heavy rocks over their heads during long roll calls. They were also often forced to stand for hours in snow, ice, and rain from 3 a.m. to 9 a.m. Anyone who didn't stand straight would get beaten with a rubber truncheon until they became unconscious. She also greatly increased the death counts by ordering selection parades as she had in Birkenau. Although Grese was only at Belsen for only 3.5 weeks, she was so cruel that the prisoners dubbed her the Beast of Belsen. Arrest and death. As the Allies loosened the Nazi stronghold on Europe, Grese went from destroying people's lives to trying to save her own. In the spring of 1945, the British arrested Grese, and, along with 45 other Nazis, Grese found herself accused of war crimes. Although she pleaded not guilty, the testimony of witnesses and survivors of Grese's mania got her convicted and sentenced to death. On December 13, 1945, Irma Grese was hanged. At just 22 years old, Grese has the distinction of being the youngest woman hanged under British law during the 20th century. What do you think? Irma Grese had a rough childhood. She got bullied at school and she didn't get any love from her father. Some psychologists believed that she suppressed her inner rage and released it in her role as a powerful female guard in the camps. Do you think that the death penalty was too harsh a punishment for her? Do you feel she deserved a worse punishment than she got, having committed all of those crimes? Let us know in the comments section below. Ratings. We have to admit that things may have turned out differently for Irma Grese if she had been shown more love by her father. Going by our ratings, where 1 is pretty much the average Joe in the street, maybe someone refusing to give a tip, and 100 is equal to the worst people ever lived, on this scale, and as our start of this new season, we would give Irma Grese 89. Now, this naturally puts her on top for this season, and stay tuned for the coming weeks to see how this will fill up. But it also places her pretty close to the top even in the overall scoreboard. How would you rate her? Leave a comment with your score and reason in the comment section, and feel free to check out some of our other episodes from the first season. Don't forget to like this video. Also, hit that subscribe button to get updated on our next episode coming next week.